Hello and welcome to Cinema Spotlight with your hosts Jake and Reuben. I'm Jake.
I'm Reuben.
And this week we'll be talking about a very weird roster of films. We have the big Disney box office bomb, Snow White, starring Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot.
Next up, we have the Oscar winner for Best Animated Feature, Flow.
And Robert De Niro returns in true sleepy form in the new gangster thriller Alto Knights.
And what's this? Rachel Zegler appearing again? She has her second film of the week in Y2K.
And we're also talking about the Michael Bay classic Bad Boys on its 30th anniversary release.
And do make sure that you're following us over on our YouTube and Spotify channels. Like, share, subscribe, comment. Tell us everything that we got wrong. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
And my usual call out to all you aspiring filmmakers out there. If you want to have your work seen and get interviewed, then please email us at cinemaspotlightjakeandreuben@gmail.com. We'd love to have a chat. First up this week, we have Mark Webb's new disaster, Snow White, a film that is plummeting at the box office, a film that is hastily being swept under the rug by the mass Disney Corporation. The film sees former Princess Snow White banished from the kingdom by an evil queen who has usurped her way into greater power. This film is very interesting, Reuben. I went to see it and I was alone in the cinema. I think there's a lot to be said about this film because it is the hot button political topic film. It's Disney gone woke again, which is agonizing that this type of language and this type of conversation about these Disney films just continues. It's a nightmare, I think. So I'd like to hear your perspective, not only about the film, but maybe about the wider situation happening with this version of Snow White.
Yes, so I think this is exactly the headline that I've seen a billion times over that's sort of made me, sick to my stomach. The words Snow White, woke and disaster coupled together. The number of sort of, Daily Mail articles I've seen about this makes me feel ill. But actually, I think that a lot of the, the bad press that it's getting is hiding the fact that the film itself is fairly okay, honestly. There has been a huge amount of controversy, and some of it I think completely, rightly so, when this remake was announced, and crucially, this is just called Disney's Snow White. It's not called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, because there was a reluctance and a hesitance to really delve into the politics of representing the kind of the dwarven characters that we see in the 37 original on screen in the same way. When this film was announced, Peter Dinklage, who's obviously, he's a little person, there was an interview in which he talked about the fact that this was a very regressive piece of storytelling and it was fundamentally othering. And I think, that's an important conversation to be having, and it's good that he brought it up. Similarly, there have been people criticising the casting of those characters in the film because in an attempt to sidestep any controversy, the decision was made to do the same as what was done with Hugh Grant in Wonka. Actors of average height are cast in these roles and then kind of CG'd into more fantasy dwarf characters, more like you'd see in Norse mythology. So there's been a lot of interesting kind of conversations happening about that, which I think are valuable. What I don't think are very valuable are the conversations that have been happening about the casting of Rachel Zegler as Snow White. And the reasons for that are entirely because, people who are racist think it is unreasonable that an actress has been cast who doesn't have Caucasian white skin. She's of Colombian descent, she's a Latina actress, she does not have white skin, and therefore they're up in arms. They think that's outrageous, they think this is too woke, and frankly I have absolutely no time for those complaints. I think that's incredibly racist and utterly proven to be stupid, because Rachel Zegler is by far and away the best part of the film. She is a shining star. She continues to be absolutely brilliant in everything she does. I love her in West Side Story. I think she's absolutely terrific. And listen, she's even good in things like Shazam! Fury of the Gods, which is a film that I have time for. I had a decent amount of fun with, but I know that a lot of people really hate. I think she's great. She's really good as Snow White. It's a shame that the film around her isn't up to the same standard. And certainly a lot of criticism has been directed to her sort of co-star of sorts, which is Gal Gadot playing the evil queen. I think, again, people feel that her performance is incredibly hammy. I've seen a lot of Go Girl Give Us Nothing memes. I thought, honestly, she was pretty decent. There's been a lot of very obvious and visible kind of political clashing between the two leads. Rachel Zegler very vocally voicing support for Palestine in the war in Gaza, and Gal Gadot as a former member of the IDF advocating for Israel. And I think that's, engendered a huge amount of apolitical visibility for this film, but also it has, I think, engendered a real level of kind of negativity and discourse on both sides. It's been boycotted by people on both sides of that debate, which I think is definitely a big part of its box office struggles. But I have to say, I thought that both of them were good. I thought they both gave excellent performances. I've seen criticism of Gal Gadot's singing. I thought it was perfectly fine. I didn't think it was exceptional. I thought it was just the right degree of hammy, honestly. If we're getting these unbelievably lazy, in my opinion, live action remakes, at least try and do something interesting with the story, at least try and cast it interestingly. And to be honest, I think they did do that. They've changed the third act. Another woke move, guys. They've changed the third act of Snow White. What is the world coming to? But they've made it much more interesting. They've made it much better. In this version of the story, she becomes a kind of figurehead for revolution, and I enjoyed that, and I thought Rachel Zegler played it really well. Interestingly, given that she's cast opposite Gal Gadot, I thought that her appearance on screen was interestingly reminiscent of Gadot's performance as Wonder Woman, because Wonder Woman is a character who just exudes goodness and purity of heart from every pore, and that's a very, very similar role to the one that Rachel Zegler is performing here as Snow White. She is white as snow in terms of her heart. She's so generous, she's so kind, she's so good, and we get all of that from the performance that Rachel Zegler is giving in absolute spades. So I really enjoyed the performances all the way through the film. I thought Zegler was great. I thought, the singing was broadly pretty good across the board. I thought it was perfectly okay as a live action remake, with the exception of one perhaps crucial factor, which is the dwarves, which I have to say I think are uncanny valley nightmares. I absolutely hated them every second that they were on screen. They look very, very fake and quite creepy and quite dead behind the eyes in a way that I found very distracting and not remotely charming. So my enjoyment of this film was massively divided into sort of two sections, which is the first half an hour where there are none of the seven dwarfs in sight, and the final 30 minutes again where they're nowhere to be seen, and the middle, I think, is where it gets really into sort of muddy sort of, oh gosh, this is a lot of CG and it looks very rushed territory, and that's sort of for me where the film's problems lie, are in that middle section. It's a strange film. I like parts of it a decent amount. I like other parts of it not at all. So I think it balances out at being completely okay. Unnecessary, but if you're going to remake Snow White, at least make quite a different film, and they have done that. So kudos, I guess, to Mark Webb and Disney.
I think my esteemed co-host has made some very great points. He succinctly talked about the controversy, and I won't divulge on it. I think Rachel Zegler is the best part of the movie. She is perfect for Snow White. She has princess quality, the only good singing voice in the entire film. I will get onto that because this film, I think a lot of people expect me to rant at the big dud this week, but no, I thought it was fine. I think it's a bit too bland to have a kid's interest, but the Seven Dwarfs are terrifying.
They're awful, aren't they? They're absolutely awful.
There's such charming actors who they've got to voice them. You've got Jeremy Swift from Ted Lasso. You've got Titus Burgess, Toby Kleber as well as Grumpy, and all give decent vocal performances, as you'd expect for the Seven Dwarfs. Dopey, who's supposed to look like this very cute character, is terrifying, absolutely terrifying. Every time he smiles, it's kind of gross. And then controversially, which I will spoil, is that Dopey speaks, which he never did in the original film. I'm just like, why are people so up in arms about this? Because did you really care about a movie from 1937 that much? It's not like the killing of Han Solo. It's not like making Doctor Who the original Gallifreyan. It doesn't really matter. It's just it's a movie. They changed some stuff. It's a pivotal moment that Dopey has to speak to spur on the others. It's not rewriting history. It's not. There's been far more controversial things. I watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood again the other day, and I was like, that rewrites the entire real history, and no one thought that was a bad thing. Maybe some. The film is just very bland, and that's where my real criticism comes in. I don't think Gal Gadot is good. I think she is hammy in sort of the wrong way. It just seems to be going too far in one way and not far enough in the other. It doesn't seem like she's having any fun, but yet she's giving it a bit too much compared to everything else. It doesn't quite work. But this brings me on to the real problem with the film, which is that the music by Pasek and Paul is absolutely terrible. Terrible in the sense that it is bland. It feels like a rip-off of Moana. The main song, Waiting for a Wish, is just How Far I'll Go Again. The same chords, I think. Same chord structure as well. The music is typical Pasek and Paul. It's just stomp, stomp, clap, stomp, stomp, clap, whoa, 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 whoa. And then the villain song is so drab and doesn't really have anything to say. It doesn't offer anything. It doesn't use Gal Gadot's singing voice very well. There should have been a big credit on this film that says, thank you to the auto-tuning machine, the Vocal Vox 9000 that was working overtime in this film. The bandit, who is not the prince, played by Andrew Burnap, I'm not sure if he could sing because he might have had a decent voice, but it was so synthesized I couldn't tell. And Gal Gadot was, oh my days. People should stop telling these famous actors who already are famous for acting that they can also sing if they can't, or give them lessons. You spent 260 million on this film and you couldn't afford some singing lessons? My musical theatre friends, if they go and see this, will hate the form of Gal Gadot. It's very forced. And this was such a cliche movie because I know Snow White very well, but also in the sense that every single beat, you can tell when a song's coming on because they have that slight brief pause where it's like, Gal Gadot's not going to sing, is she? And then she starts singing. I was like, oh gosh. Of course, a lot of people argue about the wokeness, and of course they're changing a lot of the love stories between the princesses and what were originally their princes to make them a bit more modern. And I was like, well, that's good, because a lot of these stories are a little outdated. The way that Disney will often do this, it's not in a woke way, they just make it slightly more boring and inconceivable how they fall in love. They could just allow people to have some genuine performances that aren't forced. I think Beauty and the Beast was the same. Well, we have to add all these layers because we don't want accusations of Stockholm Syndrome. You could just write it better, because I don't think in any of the Disney live-action remakes has there actually been decent chemistry between the two leads. Same in this one. They fall in love quite quickly over a rather bland song. There should have been a bit more trust. I think with these films, they're just lazy. The lazy remakes, they just are banking on nostalgia, and it's not woke. It's just unimaginative. They haven't learned any lessons, and I think they need to, because people are just going to go the wrong way and politicize all these films when in fact they're just not very good. So make them better so people don't have any right to make these stupid accusations or wild racist comments. They will, because racists do as racists do. So, Reuben, did you have high hopes for this film, or did it just sink like it has at the box office?
I mean, I actually disagree with you to a certain extent. I think that this is a perfectly fine watch for you to take your children to go and see, honestly. I think that they will be engaged. I think that the storyline is decent enough and that the performances are decent enough that I actually think they'll have a pretty good time. If I had children, I think I'd definitely be taking them to watch this over the Easter break, because it's fun, it's escapist, and I like the revolutionary turn that, Snow White takes. There's a scene in which, she sort of returns to the kingdom, and she's a bit like the man with no name at the end of A Fistful of Dollars. Everyone thinks, everyone thinks Clint's dead, but he shows up and he's got the iron breastplate underneath. I thought it was great. I liked the recasting of that figure.
She kind of looks like Luke Skywalker when she comes back at the end in this big red cloak. And also, for a revolutionary, they don't seem to understand the fact that their entire mining workforce are just 7 mythical little creatures that don't seem to have a union. So, I mean, talk about woke Disney film. I don't think this is very good for trade unionist rights.
You know what? You're so right. Damn it! I want the Snow White version where everyone forms a union at the end and they get workers' rights. That's the Snow White I want to see. But as this isn't quite bold enough, it's less Snow White and it's more Snow Beige. The next film we are going to be talking about is the Academy Award winner for Best Animated Feature. It's the new Latvian film Flow, which was made using the open source animation software Blender and is completely wordless. It follows the exploits of a cat and it is in UK cinemas this week. It's been rapturously received, I have to say. So, Jake, tell me, were you on board with all the praise this film has been getting?
Oh, yeah, this film is a masterpiece. It is special. It was just so existential and so in-depth and beautiful. My gosh, like a painting. Because it has a very specific style. It is gorgeous, like absolutely gorgeous. The way that water moves and the way the colours, the blues and the deepness of everything, it's marvellous. It follows a cat and then several other animals as the water levels rise inexplicably. And of course, we only see it through the perspective of a cat who doesn't comprehend greater cognitive thought than what a cat can. But it's so effective. It's a brilliant silent movie because the music is fabulous. It has a very video game quality to it. Not that you're playing a video game, but it feels like the modern Zelda or Stardew Valley. It's got a nice coziness to it, even though there's a lot of stress felt by the characters. It's set in an almost tropical rainforest almost setting, which gives it a good separation from modern sensibilities from people like us who live in Western towns or cities. You know, it has a very natural vibe. It's a very pastoral film, apart from, as I said, it has levels of high stress. You can read the emotion on all the animals' faces really, really neatly. You can really connect with it. There were loads of families going to see this movie. You think that slightly pessimistic thought that, will kids really vibe with a film that has no dialogue, that has very cute animals, yes, but is quite a challenging film in the sense of that it does deal with trauma. There's even a moment where the main cat experiences a sort of PTSD flashback. But the kids were loving it. There's so much laughter because it is quite funny. Again, no words, just actions of animals. You really connect with them. They're not even anthropomorphic. They don't speak. They don't act out of species. They act like cats. They act like dogs. They act like ring-tailed lemurs. It really is a really masterful work. When I was watching it, I felt like, oh, it reminds me of the Iron Giant or maybe even Inside Out in the sense of its deep through line. It's very intricate storytelling, but this film even elevates it a bit above those films because it does it without saying a single word. The idea of survival is just so persistent, but survival and collaboration, you can read into it in any way because it could just be this story of animals just surviving a rather strange natural event, but it could also be much, much deeper and about the need for collaboration of different cultures to come together to unite to save one another from rising climate issues. That's the broader sense of it, but it doesn't hit you over the head with it because, as I said, it's so subtle. Kids can enjoy it because there's cute dogs who do funny things and a wonderful central cat protagonist who's not jarring and is very accessible because everyone's got these beautiful big eyes that you just latch onto. As a grown man watching this, I was like, no, this is really clever. It deals with conflict so subtly and deals with very heavy stuff, but in a way that the right-wing mob or the pundits can't attack it because it's just so beautifully done. Again, what Snow White could have done is make a good film to tell your new progressive point. This is another film that is incredibly progressive, yet does it so well that you can see both. You know, take your kids, but as a grown-up, you'll get so much out of it because it is just, it's magic. I'm so glad it won, and I really did like the roster for animated films. It was a great Oscars year for animated films, but this is so elevated because it comes from nowhere and makes such a beautiful point, and yet it's just painted with gorgeous colours. And by gosh, as a filmmaker and even a composer as well, it just, everything comes together to create a true piece of art that the whole family can enjoy. One thing I heard about this film is that the adoption rate for black cats has gone through the roof.
I also saw this. That feels like such a lovely thing to have come out of this film.
It's like a great mirror. You can see so much of yourself in it, and just sit and watch and enjoy how truly, truly beautiful it is. And now we move on to our next film, a gangster thriller starring Robert De Niro. Where have I heard that one before? This film is directed by Barry Levinson and wrote by Nicholas Pileggi, who also penned Goodfellas and Casino. The film stars Robert De Niro not in just one role, but in two, as two mob bosses, Frank Costello and Vito Genovese. And does it pay off? Does it work? Is Robert De Niro worth the double paycheck? Probably where most of the film's budget went, because it didn't go many other places. This film is such an odd creature, Reuben. It didn't have much marketing in this country, at least, and then all of a sudden I saw a trailer for it and I was like, well, this looks bizarre. It looks very stock. It's based on a true story, and, well, I'm sure we're going to have a lot to say.
Yeah. So I also didn't know that this film existed until about a month ago when I saw a poster for it on the tube. And it was a poster that made me stop and look at it, not because it looked, interesting and arresting, but because I thought that can't be a real film because it looked so cheap. I think that this film is a fascinating curio because it's really, really boring, and I have no idea why any of the people who made it got involved. It honestly feels like these very talented, writer, director, and star were sort of sat around one day and they found, I've got a script over here. Oh, I've got a weird performance in me. Oh, I've got half an hour to fill my schedule, and they just sort of like bundled it together into something very, very half-hearted. It feels like leftovers. It feels like scraps found on the cutting room floor of a much, much better film. Maybe Goodfellas. All of those bits have been sort of stitched together into something vaguely resembling a film, at which point someone shrugged and gone, that'll do. I mean, it's just phenomenally boring. I spent the first half an hour thinking, this isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be honest. Not a very good trailer, very bad poster, but not awful. And then it became really bad. It's really, really, really boring. It looks quite nice. The cinematography's decent. It's got quite a nice score too. I love a period piece. There's some fun suits, some nice cars. But honestly, I just was sat there thinking, it's still going. And at one point I thought, this must be the climax. This must be the end of the film. And then realised, no, it's the beginning of the third act. And I leaned over to my friend and I said, I'm really not sure how much more of this I can take. And the answer was I had like another 35 minutes to take, and it was genuinely a struggle. So honestly, I was mind-blowingly bored by this. I really did not enjoy it. De Niro gives a thoroughly decent performance in one of the roles, and that's the Costello role, and then the Genovese role is just so just boring and silly, and I have no idea why they've cast him in two roles. Like, you think, it's going to be because they want to make you think, they're two sides of the same coin, but it's just pants. Honestly, the whole film is pants, and it feels like everybody's just going through the motions of making a film because they've all done good stuff before. Honestly, I was so bored by this. And when it ended, it almost feels like they just give up at the end of the film, because the final shot is deeply strange and doesn't feel like it was meant to be in a film released in cinemas, because it's a sort of slightly weird shot of someone walking through a wood. And it just sort of finishes, fades to black. Were you bored by this, Jake? Are you on the same page? Were you also baffled by the fact that they use multiple fonts for different intertitles throughout the film, and the capitalization of each word is insane, and it looks like it might have been edited in Movie Maker?
Well, this film, to me, is mildly compelling.
What? Sorry? Compelling?
No, hear me out, because I'm not saying it's a compelling story, because it's not. It's the blandest of bland. It's the clichéest of cliché. It is stock. I think this film is the most bizarrely edited film I've seen in a long time. Frank Costello, the sort of main Robert De Niro character, the sort of main character of this film, gets gunned down, or attempts to gun down, and yet...
This made me laugh in the cinema. First I gasped, because I didn't know it was coming, and then because of the way it's edited, I just burst out laughing.
It's like a 90s music video.
It's like the parodies of Bollywood films that you see on YouTube as well, where it's like the same thing is going to be replayed 5 times.
Yeah, so the editing is what really drove me insane. It's got too much pace in some aspects, but then the dialogue just seems to continue. You know what it felt like to me when I was watching it, before I actually knew, because who knew anything about this movie, that Nicholas Pileggi wrote. It felt like a fresh out of film school student was somehow able to get enough money to get Robert De Niro, and he's like, okay, we've got Robert De Niro, so what do we do? Cast him in 2 roles. Okay, I've written this script, but it's my first script, it's not very good, so ad-lib, everyone ad-lib. But all they're doing is talking over each other, the same stuff, same lines. Why didn't you kill the guy? I thought you'd kill the guy. Why didn't you kill him? You didn't kill him. What is going on here?
Get me an espresso. I'm Italian. I need to be drinking espresso.
You should have killed him. I was trying to kill him, but you didn't kill him. And that goes on and on and on. And it's like, but I was a mob boss once, Frank. I was a mob boss once. It's like, you were a mob boss once, Vito. You were a mob boss once. And it's like, and this goes on. They don't end any scene. It just fades out because they don't know what to do. It does feel like, oh, we've only got Robert De Niro. We have to use every single bit with Robert De Niro in, because God knows what delusional old man thoughts all 3 of these had. Whether it was like, oh, he could probably get nominated for an Oscar. He's playing 2 people. It's gangsters. Everyone's going to love this. They do put these prosthetics on and glasses for the other Robert De Niro, the Vito Genovese character. This half works. I guess you can tell them apart.
No, but if you can tell them apart, they cast different people. This is the thing, it makes no sense. This isn't like Tom Hardy playing both the Krays in Legend, because they're twins. These guys aren't related. There's just no reason for them to be played by the same guy, especially when, as you say, like, they've made him up to look quite distinct. It's one of many baffling decisions. At one point in this film, there is a really extended section where they talk, it's like sub-Tarantino dialogue about the Mormons and where the Mormons came from. I was genuinely losing my mind. What is this? And you're dead right about it feeling like a student film. I had no idea until the credits rolled who had made this. And I just sat there thinking, gosh, this must be a first-time filmmaker. Everything about it, like the calibration of everything, is absolutely whack.
It's just completely lazy and cheap. It's the cheapest thing, and it tells a story that spans, 50 years almost, maybe. It covers...
like 100 to me, Jake.
Oh, yes, it
felt like 100 to me, Jake.
It is too long. Goodfellas is a long film, Casino's a long film, but they fill that with intrigue, good performances, especially Goodfellas. There's so much energy in every single scene that you feel like you can keep watching those types of films. That's the Scorsese charm. But this film just drags and drags and drags. And there's just bits that, that they could embellish with, that they don't. The other Robert De Niro, Vito Genovese, has this love affair that then causes this sort of, eventually is the linchpin that causes the downfall of the entire mob. That love affair is only briefly touched upon. But it also feels like Robert De Niro is too old through the entire movie. He's playing several different ages, and yet is an 80-year-old man playing several different ages. And I mean, he does kind of look like them a bit. It's like watching treacle, but not as sweet. What can be said? I don't agree with you that the cinematography or the score are good. I think the cinematography is bad in a way. Half the shots are out of focus. It just seems very, very rushed. You're right, it does feel like they had an extra half an hour to make a 2.5-hour film. By the end, I got Stockholm syndromed into it, I guess I want to see what happens, but it's just all a bit ludicrous.
I did not want to see what happened. Honestly, I can't tell you how much my soul left my body when I realised that the end of the film was quite far away. I always go into films wanting to like them and thinking, okay, maybe this will be a pleasant surprise. And honestly, as I say, for the first half an hour, I thought, oh, this isn't too bad. Honestly, it is leaden. It's worse. It's slower than treacle. It's crystallised because it's so painfully slow. I was getting depressed. It was... it was bad. It was a bad experience. The stuff that is completely inexcusable coming from these people is the way in which it feels like they didn't really know what the story was as they were shooting. And at the end of the day, they've tried to cobble something together and they've patched it all up with one of the maybe the most egregious, voiceover narration I've seen in recent years. We just repeatedly cut to De Niro talking to the camera. He's not talking to anybody else. We never see like an interviewer or a family member listening to him. He absolutely just went in and they were like, Bob, we need to work out what the story is. So can you narrate at length, please? And just stare at the camera for a bit. And so he does. Surely Hollywood, we can do better for these guys. The only thing that I liked was at one point, De Niro invites a bunch of journalists over to his house and cooks some spaghetti and sausages. And I was like, oh, that looks quite yummy. That looks nice. That looks like a tasty treat. There is a hilarious thing where the Vito character is just always drinking coffee, or he's always got a little mocha pot next to him, or he's eating a little pastry. Like it's like they're really struggling to find a way of differentiating the characters, and they were just like, "You're going to be very Italian."
Don't see this film. I wish this movie would get whacked itself. Dreadful.
Well, Snow White isn't the only film this week that stars Rachel Zegler, because the next film on our list is Y2K, the new A24 horror comedy directed by Kyle Mooney in his feature directorial debut. This also features Julian Dennison from Hunt for the Wilder People and Jaeden Martel from Knives Out, so a very promising cast. But my understanding is that general reactions to this have been fairly mixed. So Jake, how did you get along with Y2K when you went to see it earlier this week?
Now, Reuben, you were born in what year?
I was born in June 1999, so I just about was around for the millennium bug fiasco of 2000.
You're 1999, I knew that, I just wanted you to say it. And I was 1998, and this film is for people who were teenagers during 1999. It is all 1999. All the language, all the dress sense, all the music, everything is so 90s. It's so cool, bruh. That's how half the people talk in this movie. Did I like it? It's basically Superbad meets... Well, it's basically more like This Is the End, but Superbad. So those two movies slammed together with a similar sort of level of humour as well, the same sort of style. Very adolescent sex jokes and awkward comedy and stuff like that, and weed humour. There's lots of drug humour in this as well. Is this film any good? Now that's a question. Rachel Zegler is good in everything, I think. I'm just going to put that out there. She's absolutely fine, given not much to do. This film is as bland in its story beats as Snow White was, as Alto Knights was. For this budding coming of age comedy, it has all the same beats, but also with a few apocalyptic teenagers must save the day sort of approach as well. So all the beats are a hit. It's almost like they had a sheet on the side when Kyle Mooney was writing the script. Oh, that has to happen here. That has to happen here. That has to happen here. And it is really quite formulaic in that regard. The nerdy character wants to get with the really popular girl, but secretly she's a cool hacker.
Whoa! Who would have seen that coming?
Who would have seen that coming? But you can also say, well, is it a parody on that idea, the tropes? Is it a parody on the formula? Does it subvert it enough to make it seem like that is the point? And there is actually a few jokes that work in this, which is that Rachel Zegler's secret hacker cool girl character has this great sequence where she's hacking in, but then she uses phrases like, I make this look good, but done humorously, or, hold on tight, like they did in all those hacker movies. And I thought those jokes actually really worked, because that's like, oh, it is a parody on the idea. The problem is that everything else is just played so straight. The nerdy kids go to a cool party, but it's like, we're not getting as good a version of that as Superbad. Why these characters are awkward and unliked, it's touched upon, but it's not really developed in the performances. I think the performances all round are good, apart from one, which are good all round for what they have been asked to do. For example, people might think I'm talking about Fred Durst, who, spoilers, shows up in this movie, the famous frontman of Limp Bizkit, but he actually gives a rather charming and enjoyable performance that is integral to the plot of the film. That is another fun moment. There's a lot of love for that sort of rap rock which is so often maligned in sort of the modern context, and even in the day, even though it was incredibly popular. But it is seen as a saving force, which is really quite interesting to see. It's like a recontextualization of some of the goofier moments of the 90s. It just sort of falls into this trap of being a bit bland, even though it's trying to be really quite out there with its Y2K premise, which is great. The absolute hysteria that surrounded something that obviously wasn't going to happen. I find it quite funny how they represent the robot apocalypse. They just have people in these really daft suits half the time looking like robots, and it kind of looks a bit like an episode of Power Rangers, which I enjoyed.
That actually sounds quite charming, I have to say. Does it have a little bit of a Doctor Who vibe? That's kind of what I'm hearing.
No, that's the thing. This is where it kind of still fails. It's like what I said about it being a parody of the formula, of this entire formula, is that it doesn't go too far in one direction, so it just sort of settles in a rather bland space. It's frustrating because I really did want to enjoy it, because like you, I really did like the way the trailer did. I like the use of Chumbawamba, which also makes a appearance. I get knocked down and I get back up again. This film certainly has been knocked down and it's not getting back up again, I can tell you that. Kyle Mooney also shows up in this, and his performance is absolutely agonizing. It's so, I'm the director and I'm playing a stoner and I was on SNL and I can do a funny voice. It doesn't work. It's just annoying. There's so many jokes where you're like, they obviously subvert some of the tropes. They're trying to do some action tropes that then get subverted for comedy, but you can tell exactly what's going to happen. I'll not spoil which character it is, but there's a character who starts looking all cool and martial arts and actiony, and then gets quickly dispatched and killed instantly, as you'd expect. It's such an obvious joke to make, and they make it. This is a comedy that could have existed in the late 2000s, I think, and would have done a little better. For this sort of generation, it doesn't quite work because it's all the most annoying parts of the 90s on steroids. Everyone talks like MTV, and everyone is such an idiot for some reason. Everyone is stupid and pretentious in their own way. I enjoy the young cast. I like Jaeden Martel, and I love Julian Dennison. I think Hunt for the Wilder People is one of the greatest films ever made. I think I'll put that out there. It makes me feel, which is always good. I can understand why it hasn't done well. I don't think it's as bad as people are saying. It just falls into the line that a lot of these films do, that it is just bland, and therefore you can get a lot out of it. There's a lot of creativity in place, and the young cast do well with what they're given, because it is quite a young cast. It's nice to see that people who are not 38 are playing all these high schoolers. We're back to sort of early 20s who kind of look younger than they are, playing these roles. Tim Heidecker shows up, and to me that's always a plus, but again, he's not really given much to do. Nothing truly funny, and the emotional scenes don't really work. I don't think the love story really works very well. Maybe it's worth a watch to see what you think, Reuben. As an ode to the 90s, like the Clinton administration, I wish this film had been impeached.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
And our final film this week, a rare 5-movie roster on Cinema Spotlight, is the 30th anniversary of Bad Boys, directed quite famously by Michael Bay, starring Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. This film has quite the legacy. Of course, it starts the career of Michael Bay. Of course, he was a very famous advertisement and music video director, but then became a powerhouse and has made billions and billions at the box office. The film also began a film series. There are 4 films now, one coming out as recently as last year, Bad Boys Ride or Die. Now, this was my first time watching Bad Boys, and I had an interesting experience with it, Reuben, because of course 1995 was a long time ago and the sensibilities have changed, action has changed. Really, I'd love to know your opinion, as I know it was your first time too.
It was. I don't know how I've gone through life not having seen Bad Boys, but I somehow have. And do you know, I think Michael Bay's an interesting director. I like The Rock. I think The Rock is really good fun, and I think he knows how to deliver action. And I think, from my point of view, to get to the heart of what Bad Boys is its cinematic spectacle on every level. I think he really delivers dollar signs basically at all times on screen, because he's great at making things seem big. And I don't just mean that literally, although he does. Somehow he's able to film a car like it's a behemoth. And perhaps it's from his advertising background. Proper, like, premium cinematic wowzers. Be it the cars, be it the guns, be it the chiseled abs of Will Smith. He is really, really, really good at making everything on screen look like $1 million. And it's because he has this, incredibly keen commercial sensibility. He's very finely attuned to how to make everything look good on camera. There's certainly a real, like, music video vibe to the whole film. I think it became very aped after the film came out. You've got this kind of, like, everything's always so orange. The sky always looks vaguely sort of post-apocalyptic. I was pleasantly surprised by this film. I thought it might just be kind of meat-headed, but it did make me laugh. It's quite dumb. It's obviously had huge influence over the years on action. There was a whole sort of period, I would say, stretching to the late 2000s, so, like 2009. And it's secretly, a kind of buddy cop, almost platonic romance, shaped things like Hot Fuzz. Obviously, there's that famous scene where they're talking about Bad Boys 2 in that. Bad Boys itself is a huge influence and definitely shaped the dialogue and the language of action cinema. So honestly, I was pleasantly surprised by this. I thought it was fun. I thought it was funny. It was decent, dumb fun, honestly. It's not going to change the world, although, do you know what? It kind of did, because it did usher in a new era of action filmmaking in a way. What did you think? Did you have an okay time with this too?
Yeah, I was sort of like you, concerned. This is Michael Bay's first movie, and knowing where some of his movies have gone in sort of the Transformers series and some of his more recent films, what is this going to be? What is the first installment going to be like? I was pleasantly surprised. There is a really strong chemistry between the two leads. They do seem like good friends, even though they're constantly bickering. They do seem like an old married couple. The odd couple, it kind of works really to its benefit, and I think this is Will Smith's first big film role, and obviously started a major career and a titan of Hollywood until certain events that he's currently on his apology tour for. I actually thought this film was enjoyable, but it did have those tropes. It did feel very 90s music video. Everything is bathed in, as you said, an orange, and then also strobe lighting everywhere. How no one has epileptic seizures or anything in these places. And everything's bathed in dry ice smoke so that the light carries through. Like, everyone's a bit larger than life and does very illegal things but gets away with it because they're so cool. Yes, okay, it does have an outdated mentality, especially with the central two characters and their sort of platonic bromance. Oh, we're not gay, no, definitely not gay.
This is a film which is unintentionally massively homoerotic. Like, it really reminded me of both Top Gun and Point Break, in both good and bad ways, but in that kind of like unbelievably amped up version of masculinity that you get in the late 80s, early 90s, which is so aggressively heterosexual it crosses all the way over to being very gay. And I really enjoyed that element to it.
As I said, they're like an old married couple. I think Will Smith isn't fully formed. It's interesting to see him in a position where actually Martin Lawrence is almost the lead actor in this. He does more. He has a better arc and to be honest, maybe a stronger performance. Michael Bay has a penchant for stereotype, and there's only a few of those here.
All the women are stereotypes, aren't they?
That sort of becomes a detriment. Julie, the character in Witness Protection, but quite literally, they just watch over her all the time and she gets involved in the action. It's supposed to be quite traumatizing, yet there's a sequence where she's just being quite overly flirtatious to try and draw out the truth of Martin Lawrence's character pretending to be Will Smith's character. Well, she's just gone through extreme trauma, and yet she's still really quite annoyingly LA white girl stereotype with a small fancy dog, stylish wardrobe, probably soy milk and vegetarianism. It's kind of like typical upper class Los Angeles. She goes through an awful ordeal and then has these moments of just weird comedy that I guess is fine because the movie's not heavy at all. The stereotyping does go against its actual story, its telling. What type of film is this? It is a big popcorn movie, and the action is great. As you said, you know, the amount of explosions are brilliant, and because it's not too muddy like, say, Transformers 2, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, 9 or 10. But this is quite succinct, and you know what's going on. It's got great use of slow-mo, lots of slow-mo. If you took the slow-mo out, the film might be half an hour shorter. It works well because these tropes come from somewhere, and it does them well. You enjoy it because it is stupid and fun, and every gunfire shot sets off 10 million explosions. So
that's exactly what I was going to say. Is this also marks the first example of, I would say, the completely trademarked Michael Bay explosion, wherein it looks nothing like a real explosion, but they're always like little firework rockets. Do you know what I'm talking about? With the big streaking tails behind them. It's like, what explosion have you ever seen in real life that looks like that? But every explosion in every Michael Bay film since has had these big, you know, fireworky explosions going off. That felt like a cinematic landmark worth noting. The jokes are good. There are some good quips. They get a lot of mileage out of Martin Lawrence and Will Smith having to pretend to be each other. I enjoyed it. I am kind of interested in watching more Bad Boys films, is what I would say. You know, Bad Boys 2 is beckoning.
Bad Boys, what you're gonna do? Well, you can go see it in the cinema or rent it to watch. Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I wouldn't watch it again, but you're right, Reuben. Maybe I will watch Bad Boys 2.
Well, that brings us to the end of yet another episode of Cinema Spotlight, and all that's left is to tell you what our films of the week are. So, Jake, why don't you kick us off? What should we be prioritising if we're heading out to the cinema this week?
It's no surprise. Go see Flow, one of the greatest pieces of filmmaking I've seen in a long time. Absolutely deserved the Oscar, and it's just wonderful. But I'm really intrigued, Reuben, to hear what your pick of the week was.
Yeah, do you know, it's a tricky one, given that I think it's not been a great week for the films I've seen. I guess you should maybe go and see Snow White if you're feeling in the mood. Yeah, it's an okay film, which is not usually what I'm saying for the film of the week. Usually I can be much more effusive, but I think Snow White is my pick for this week. So yeah, it's okay. Rachel Zegler's really good.
And that brings us to the end of this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thanks to Reuben. He always thanks me, and I always seem so cruel never thanking him back.
Jake, you smooth talker. Well, next week we won't actually be seeing each other because we are taking a small break. But what are we catching after that?
When we return, we'll be talking about the Minecraft movie, Death of a Unicorn, Novocaine, and the 30th anniversary of Muriel's wedding.
We look forward to seeing you then, and indeed, Jake, to having a good old natter about the flicks.
See you again.
Bye-bye.
Well, I'm trying to think of a pun now. So if you can think of one, Reuben, do it.